I was deep in the San Jacinto Mountains of Southern California. It was late January. It was an overcast and chilly day. It would also become a very painful one. I had just sustained a traumatic fall. When I first arrived on the ground, my right foot hit first. It arrived with such energy and force that it drove my femur through my pelvis, into my pelvic ring, snapping my pelvis off of my spine and pushing my right hip all the way up into my ribs. The edge of my right hip served as a blade as it cut arteries and lacerated multiple organs. I was in rough shape. Internally, blood was gushing out. Then, as if that weren't enough, the backup parachute that did nothing to slow my descent suddenly fluffed open in these strong winds and began taking me for a brutal ride across the top of this barren mountaintop filled with bowling ball-sized rock. This only added more broken bones and life-threatening injuries to the already long list. As a former EMT, injuries of this extent could be considered incompatible with life. Yet here I am, in front of you today, breathing and moving about independently. Not only that, but also managing a smile. How's that possible? I'm here with you today to share my recipe for resilience. Now, the first move I had to make to fully optimize this new world that I was thrust into was first to say goodbye to the previous one. This is one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do, but it was necessary. Saying goodbye to the 29-year-old Lane, I wept, I grieved, I mourned. I was devastated. And just to have an idea of how devastating this was, I think it's worthwhile to bring a little bit of my background to the forefront. Prior to this event, I had the opportunity to earn the title United States Marine. I ran multiple marathons. I was a competitive cyclist. And I was a wildland firefighter for about 10 years, the last 4 years of which were spent doing the dream job of smoke jumping. Now, what makes smoke jumping particularly unique in the fire world, and the dream job, in my opinion, is how we arrive. So we get to fires, we parachute into fires. Well, not into fires, but next to fires. And this opens up the world in terms of what we can access. It was a job filled with incredible adventures, a family that was so robust. But now what? Now what was I going to do? Before I could answer that question, I first had to survive. And fortunately, my friend Scott Warren was first on scene. He cut me free from that parachute that was dragging me. He activated EMS, and we had a helicopter that landed within a couple hundred feet quite quickly. But still, with the severity of my injuries, I was bleeding out. I bled out. I coded/died, flatlined the first time within 2 hours. Notice that I said the first time. Over the course of my 9-week coma, my incredible and compassionate mother was there every single day. And the anxiety and uncertainty she dealt with on a daily basis, I can never imagine. No mother should have to look at their child while also hearing the sound of a heartbeat indicator indicating no pulse. She watched over the course of 9 weeks as my body just withered, going from 180 pounds down to 108. Every day, they weren't sure. Is Len going to make it? It's looking good, looking good. Oh, something ruptured. So my mom took initiative to capture these beautiful moments while she felt like she could. She took my limp, lifeless, atrophied arms and put them around my my loving sister to capture this moving image just packed full of love. Over the course of my 9-week coma, I may have technically been unconscious, but my mind had never been more active because my ears still worked and my imagination was as active as it was then as it was when I was 4. And there was a lot of beauty. I could hear the voices of my fire family coming to visit, my brothers, my sisters, my mom and dad. But there were also some very terrifying moments. One so terrifying it almost cost me my life. The hospital had been using a particular medication that unfortunately was in short supply. There was a nationwide shortage. So they switched over to a different medication, and I did not respond well to it. But with the severity of my traumatic brain injury, that could have easily explained my subsequent behavior. So it wasn't immediately connected that this was an allergic reaction. And my reaction was one filled with agitation. I was paranoid. I was certain. I was in the hospital being held there against my will. I was some sort of test experiment, and my survival depended on my ability to escape. So somehow, I managed to sit up, muster the strength to pull out my breathing tube, my IVs that were transferring life-sustaining fluid, just again putting me on the brink of cardiac arrest. Then I was pinned down to the hospital bed and strapped down to it. This only confirmed my paranoia. No one could get through to me. I couldn't trust my mom, my dad, let alone the hospital staff. But my mom had an idea. If anyone can get through to Lane right now, it would be his twin brother, Lance. And Lance wasn't even in the hospital at the time, not even in the same state. But he got the phone call with the added sense of urgency, and he dropped everything. And some movers and shakers behind the scenes did what it took and got Lance to my bedside within hours. When I felt his presence and heard his voice, I was certain he was also being tortured right there alongside me. And because of that, he had credibility. He could be trusted. And Lance was able to talk me down and get me to accept treatment. This is Lance and I the following year. Had Lance not been there when he was there, there is no doubt that I would not be here on this stage in front of you today. And that's why these human connections with other people are fundamental to resilience. So I consider human connections to be the first of 4 ingredients in my recipe for resilience. Now, just what is resilience? Well, the dictionary alludes to it as being an ability to return to the previous state. But this didn't seem really applicable in my situation because I had said goodbye to the previous state. Instead, I had to learn to navigate an entirely new one. I had to learn to do more with less. I had to learn to hit turbulence, rough air, sinking air, and make the necessary adjustments to continue flying. So as a paragliding pilot, I see the world through the prism of free flight. So we'll be using metaphor to help convey this understanding of resilience and the ingredients involved. So as a glider pilot, the first thing you need in order to go anywhere, in order to cover any ground, you first need altitude. Altitude lets you go places. It offers an incredible view. Not only that, but altitude gives you time to fix problems because you will encounter turbulence. So just how do you go about gaining altitude? Well, I talked about one way already, and that's through these human connections. So we'll be calling these ingredients now sources of lift, because human connections is a phenomenal source of lift. Now, the next source of lift may be the easiest to overlook, and that's our own health. What we choose to do with our bodies and put in our bodies is of extraordinary significance. I'm certain, had I not been in the best shape of my life on the worst day of my life, I wouldn't have survived. Now, the third source of lift, I think, requires the most discipline and determination, and that is keeping a constructive attitude. When I first came out of my coma and was sizing up what I was dealing with, it's easy to get caught in that whirlpool and just eddy into it. But I shifted my mindset constructively on, I may not have control over this, and this, but you know what do I have control over? You know what? I can bring a camera to my one good eye. So with that, I took my savings from the previous fire season and I went all in on camera equipment. And since I was a child, a camera has always been a close companion. And this continued all the way until my time on the hotshot crew. And at the end of every fire season, I would put together a season summary video highlighting all the fires that we went on. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I wasn't only growing my skill set as a videographer, but I was also demonstrating it to my fire family. And this was huge because in the national fire world, there's an ongoing need for training videos. And in my state of paralysis, I had a need. I needed work. And again, through these human connections, driven by a constructive attitude, I was able to make training videos for the National Fire Center. And the first video I made just so happened to be about helicopters and their evolving role on wildfires. Now, with the helicopter playing an essential role in my survival, I felt really strongly about this. So I placed significant emphasis on their role in emergency medical situations. And I did this by highlighting a couple federal agencies that were using some advanced techniques. Because not everyone is as fortunate as me where a helicopter can land within a couple hundred feet, especially for wildland firefighters that are working in the most mountainous, densely forested places in the country. So these other techniques like hoist and short haul are game changers. And at the time, the Forest Service did not have a policy like that. And I think this video I produced just joined the already mounting pressure on the Forest Service because the next year, the Forest Service signed off on the first new Forest Service aviation program in 50 years, the Emergency Medical Short Haul Program. And I was brought in to create all the training videos for the first ever United States Forest Service short haul class. And I'm confident that this program and these firefighters and this image will save lives. I could have never imagined that the crowning achievement, the greatest contribution I would make to my nationwide fire family would be after I was no longer fighting fire. Now, the fourth and final source of lift may be the most simple, and that is recognizing the power of choice. Regardless of the devastation and depression you're dealing with and how limiting the circumstance may seem, you can always find some semblance of a decision to be made. This was hugely insightful because when I first came out of my coma, nothing seemed to work. I would say, move, foot, no, not today. How about hand? No, not happening. So in this limp, paralysis state, I made a realization. I may not be able to control much, but I can control one thing, perhaps the most significant thing. I can get a hold of my mind, and I can direct my imagination. I can choose which memories I want to relive and what futures I want to imagine. And this had the effect of pulling me out of depression and despair. It tilted my chin up and gave me hope. And the other thing that kept my chin up and my eyes oriented skyward is my passion for paragliding. I knew the moment I was able to leave the earth again and re-enter the sky, I would get back to a familiar world, a world filled with boundless potential. So going forward, starting today, go out there, find lift, gain altitude, appreciate the view, and know this: you will encounter turbulence. You will find yourself in massive parcels of sinking air. But through that, do what's most important, and that's adapting and doing whatever it takes to keep flying. Thank you.